Alright, we made it to final assembly. So what we're going to first do is install the parking linkage, shift rod, and all that good stuff, and get that out of the way. And then we'll proceed with the case air check. We'll talk through check ball locations, positions, and then we'll get the governor installed, valve body, accumulators, all that good stuff, and finally wrap this thing up. Alright, so first things I want to do is install both the shift linkage and the case connector. Okay, we're going to be using a TCI internal-external converter lockup kit for this transmission, so we have to install that too. Okay, first things first, we're going to install our selector shaft seal. Alright, these can be a little tricky, so again, one of those deals where you may want to have some redundancy, a couple spares in the event you mess up and bend the first one. Alright, so just place it in the bore as square as you can. And then use something. I'm just using this seal driver that's actually made for Ford transmissions, like a C6 E4OD, but the inner portion here is perfectly sized for the GM seals. A 15mm socket also works perfect here, you know, shallow or deep. But the shallow, I would use an extension on it. Okay, a few good smacks and it's home. Our next one is going to be the parking rod, the rooster comb, selector shaft, and then we'll follow all that up with, in fact, let me do this first. I'm going to actually install the case connector first, and then we'll do the rest of that stuff. Alright, so put your new O-ring on. The easiest way to get this on is just to kind of go over the long engagement tab and then work it over the rest of the shorter engagement tabs. Use a pick if you need to. Otherwise, just carefully work it into position. Alright, position with the tab at the 3 o'clock position as you're seeing it here, and then press it home. And that's basically it. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and install the selector shaft itself. So just lube it up. Alright, then we're going to lube the seal up a little bit. And then have the nut on here just like this, because you may have to tap it in with a hammer. This way you don't risk damaging the threads. If you do have to tap it in, only tap it in part way, because we still have to install the rooster comb, parking rod, and you know, all that good stuff. Alright, for your rooster comb, what you're going to do is you're going to have your little S-hook engagement retainer or engagement pin, whatever you want to call it, actuator arm. So this part of the rooster comb, this side here, it's going to face in this direction toward the case. So it's going to be installed just like this, with the rooster comb offset toward the case. Alright, so what you're going to do is you're going to install the little S-shaped linkage arm bracket so that it's offset to the outside of the case. And just line it up like that. Alright, now you're going to install your parking rod. Engage it like so, and it's going to go in just like this. Alright, grab your nut. And it's a 15mm nut, or it'll take a 15mm wrench, and you want to cinch this thing down as tight as you can get it once it's installed. It's kind of awkward because the rooster comb's in the way. Alright, now what you're going to do is you're going to look for your groove that's going to accept the retainer pin or nail or whatever you want to call it, and you're going to go ahead and install that. Alright, you know when you have it engaged because it'll go right in with a few taps with the hammer. And then just fully seat it. Probably going to take a punch after this is all said and done and, you know, kind of seat it fully 100% so that I know it's not going to come out. Okay. Then you can install your external bracket for your external mechanical shift linkage. That's 15mm here on this nut. Whoever rebuilt this or whoever used this or had it in the past, they painted over everything. They didn't mask anything off, so that's why the bracket itself is painted with that aluminum paint. Alright, last step in the process is to install the parking pole guide plate and the two 13mm bolts. Okay, so what you first want to do, in fact, let me move the camera so you can see what's going on. Alright, what you first want to do is just reach in here with a finger and turn the ring gear until your pole is meshed in between the two lugs. Alright, once you have that done, then go ahead, position your parking rod, and then you're going to put the guide plate in just like this. Alright, then snug it up real good. Now I'll flash the torque spec on the screen. I want to say it's something like between 6 and 10 pounds, or possibly between 15 and 20 pounds. And I apologize I don't have it memorized because I never actually torque this. I have these two bolts. I just, you know, what you saw me do just now, that's what I do. Alright, release it. Okay, you can turn the rear gear train with your finger on the lugs and then just test the parking linkage. Make sure it works. That's it. Okay, with that out of the way, reposition camera again. We're going to flip the case around so that we're facing this side, or the servo side is closest to us, and then we'll go ahead and we'll torque these bolts for the center support, do a case air check, and then ultimately proceed with the rest of the install, accumulators, valve body, and all that good stuff. Okay, do that until you cannot feel any movement whatsoever in this nail. Alright, that's good. Okay, 15 to 20 foot-pounds on your center support feed bolts. So do 17, 10 millimeter. Okay, that's done. Alright, now we're going to do a case air check. Alright, so with the case air check, you can test all your clutch circuits except for one with just air and nozzle. So this is going to be your overdrive feed, this is going to be your forward, your direct, and your high reverse. Down here is your low reverse. Okay, all those can be tested with just the air nozzle, and that's it. You also have your coast clutch feed, which is here. And unfortunately, you're going to need a test plate or something equivalent to test this, because the way that they have the feed hole, it is buried at the bottom of this channel, and unless you have a super flexible nozzle or something like that, you're never going to get down there with it. So what I'm using is a piece of plexiglass. It's actually the base of my CCing kit for, you know, cylinder heads, and then I'm using the little rubber seal or gasket, if you will, from my Sonic's vac test kit. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of press down on this with a fair amount of my weight, and then I'm going to put air, and you should hear the coast clutch apply and release. And unfortunately, this is not a perfect seal, so all that air you're hearing is rushing out from, you know, between the plate and the rubber gasket. But that's how you test it. I mean, it's not perfect. There may be an actual test plate available, or you can certainly fabricate one where you can install the case gasket and then bolt the test plate to the case using whatever bolts here at the bolt hole locations, and that's it. But this is very crude, but it works. So, all right, we'll test the overdrive clutch. So that's going to be right over here. Okay, I'm getting a lot of air back feeding through this nozzle, so let me actually get rid of it. Alright, forward. direct. Okay, the air you're hearing is actually coming out of the high reverse. This clutch will cross leak into the high reverse if you're using Teflon sealing rings on the center support. And the ones I'm using, the 480E center support Teflon one-piece rings, they will seal up completely once actual transmission fluid's working into that circuit under operation. But for air checking, it's going to cross leak. Just be aware of that, and it's not anything to worry about. Okay, now your high reverse, you're going to have to somehow plug the direct. Okay, this seal wasn't perfect. I mean, my pinky can't, it's a little bit too wide. It'll seal off a little bit, but not entirely. So that's the air you're hearing. All right, lastly, low reverse. So here's low reverse. So everything is good. If you had no apply or just nothing but air in any of these circuits, then obviously you'd have to take the case back apart and figure out what was going on. But if you did any kind of air checks prior to the installation of these parts into the case, like we saw in the part 3 or part 2 of this video series, and I'm saying I'm not sure part 3 or part 2 because I'm not sure I'm going to cut it up yet, then we would have found that to be a problem. I mean, all this is just a feed passage through the case. Okay, there's not anything different. The only thing that could potentially be different in terms of air checking out of the case versus once installed into the case is this coast clutch, because it's remotely possible you can mess up the Teflon sealing rings on the input shaft. You know, a couple of which seal off the coast clutch. Now, I'll make one more comment or just note one more thing. This is a dry case, but unlike most other transmissions, the 204R will spin clockwise and counterclockwise with roughly the same amount of effort, or it will require roughly the same amount of effort to spin the shaft clockwise or counterclockwise. All right, so if you think that, like, if you're used to other transmissions coming from, say, a 4L60E, and you're building one of these for the first time and you're doing a spin test after the case is put together like this, and you're wondering or concerned that it's, you know, taking just the same amount of effort, don't worry about it. That's normal. All right, now I'm going to install the check balls. So the CK Performance Kit will only have you install 4 check balls. Okay, we're going to install the third and reverse check ball, the part throttle drive 3 check ball, the low reverse check ball, and the low detent check ball. Okay, they're all going into bathtubs. All other check balls are to be eliminated. Okay, I'll flash a picture on the screen showing all of the check balls and their, you know, associated designation. But all we're doing is installing those 4. The plate that the CK Performance Kit provides you eliminates a lot of the redundant or unnecessary circuitry, so already designed out of the plate, so you don't have to install those other check balls. Alright, so this configuration is specific to the CK Performance Kit. If you were using another kit, then obviously you'd follow the instructions as it relates to check balls that come with that kit. So the next thing I want to talk about is the accumulator for the 3/4. So the CK kit gives you 2 different options, 2 different kind of calibration settings based on engine power and red line for your engine. So if you have an engine that's making less than 350 horsepower, that's to be used in, you know, a stock or mild performance cruiser application like what we got going on, then the recommendation is to keep this active. And so CK Performance provides you the new accumulator piston along with the spring, and you would install that, and then you would follow the instructions as far as drilling the spacer plate to calibrate the 3/4 shift accordingly. Now, if you're working with an application where engine power is in excess of 350 and where the red line is 5500 RPM or greater, where vehicles going to routinely see that kind of RPM, then at that point you would simply block the accumulator circuit off altogether for the 3/4 using one of the 1/4-inch cup plugs that come in the kit. And this is the location that you would block it off, okay? You would come in, place the cup plug there, and then use a punch, and then fully seat it until it's, flush more or less with that feed port. Now, if you wanted to undo this for whatever reason, maybe the 3/4 shift is too firm, I don't know. It's not very likely, and that's why I kind of laugh a little bit, but let's just say you wanted to undo that, you would just simply carefully drill through the cup plug. But again, if you're going to do that, chances are it's because your application calls for it. If you got a stall speed of like say 2800 or better, then block it off, and that's assuming an engine power level of anywhere from 275 on up. That's my recommendation. So we're going to keep the accumulator active. The stall in this converter for this transmission is going to be 2200 or 2000 to 2200, and then if we need to block it off based on the feel of the shift, that can always be done later. Alright, just go ahead and lube your bore. And install your pin. And then your piston. Okay, this is no different than 700R4 4L60E style piston. The 1-2 accumulator pistons are unique to the 204R, but these are the same between those transmissions. Alright, now we'll go ahead and lube the whole worm tracks up. And incidentally, I don't know if I mentioned this at any other point in this video series, but I sanded the belly, the worm tracks, here and there, here, 400 grit with a Durablock. So that ensures that there's no high spots and reduces the probability of any kind of cross leaks developing. It's recommended you do that on pretty much all transmissions, especially these older ones. So anything that has worm tracks like this and what I call closed belly design, you want to do that. Alright, the CK Performance Kit is going to provide you a gasket set for the spacer plate. So you have the case gasket here. You'll notice there's a C in this location. And then this is the valve body, or set for the valve body. I guess I should probably have it upside down, oriented the right way. That's the indicator. Alright, next is the plate. So I have everything written on the back side. So here's your 2-3 feed. We're drilling these 100 thousandths. The 1-2, we're drilling 80 thousandths. Originally had it at 93, but a quick conversation with Chris, he revealed a tip to me, which I go into in a separate video in further detail about how to fine-tune the 1-2 accumulator using washers installed underneath the 1-2 accumulator piston in the housing. So this will kind of crispen up the shift and speed up the apply on that servo to the band. So we step down the feed hole from 93 thou to 80 thou. Now, if it's determined that we need to firm up that shift, we can always drill it out a little more. But that was the logic behind, why I have it crossed out there like that. The 3/4 shift is going to be 93 thousandths, and then your 2-3 accumulator, which is basically your band release, is going to be 125 thousandths for this application. He has a rubric that gives you 3 different levels of calibration, and in each rubric there's a size range, and I'll post that on the screen so that you could see what that is, and all the different ranges based on engine power and red line. Okay, so anytime you drill, you obviously want to deburr and smooth out any kind of burrs or anything sticking up. And now go ahead and install the plate to valve body gasket. And your 1-2 accumulator plate. Okay, put a little assembly lube here for your gasket. Okay, and these gaskets also come in the kit, and you'll have one in your overhaul kit as well. So you're going to have an extra set of spacer plate gaskets and an extra 1-2 accumulator plate gasket. So just FYI. Okay. So here's your 1-2 accumulator. I won't belabor the point or get into too fine a detail here. We have a separate video, but I modified this with cut washers, just garden variety washers. I put 3 of them. Each of them are, I believe, 60 thousandths thick underneath the piston to kind of raise it up, so to speak, so it's no longer blocking the feed hole, which is here, but on the inner diameter of the bore. That will crispen up the 1-2 shift because it's going to speed the piston's travel from rest position to full stop, and consequently enable a faster shift time for your 1-2. So we're basically shortening the accumulation effect. Now, the guidance in the kit is to block off the 1-2 accumulator if your engine power exceeds 350 and red line is 5500 RPM or greater. And then he has the rubric that will tell you what you should drill your hole size to. The other bit of guidance is that if you have a stall that's greater than 2800 on your converter, you may also leave out that 1-2 check ball, that's the middle one on the valve body. If you leave that out and you otherwise have either a stock or a very tight stall, then you probably will have a very harsh 1-2 shift, to the point in some cases, especially if you drill out the feed hole real big, where the vehicle is just not drivable, or it's totally unenjoyable to drive for that 1-2. Okay, as far as alignment for the case, so what you want to do is install something here. I'm just using these Kentmore alignment pins because I have them. You don't need these pins. You can use, you know, if you have a couple extra tall valve body or accumulator housing bolts, you can just cut the heads off and use them. But these pins have a J number. They're J39630-2. It's supposed to be here. For whatever reason, that's not going in as easily, so I'm just going to leave them there for now. For later models, I believe starting in 1987, this housing was changed, and you have one additional tall bolt. The housings and the spacer plates are considered a matched set, and same with the 3-4 accumulator piston. That also changed. So if you're going back with a later unit, just know that if for whatever reason you got to replace your housing, you got to get the updated housing. Okay, so here are your bolts for your accumulator housing. You're going to have one tall bolt, 3 medium length bolts, and 1 little short bolt. With the updated housing, they had 2 long bolts instead of 1. So torque spec on both the accumulator housing and the governor cover are going to be between 7 and 10 foot-pounds, and in the valve bodies between 9 and 12 foot-pounds. So I torqued both this and this to 108 inch-pounds, and in the valve body to 120. But anywhere within that prescribed range of specs that I gave you is fine. Okay, just make sure you got all 5 bolts engaged. And then 10 millimeter. 108. And I'll just work up all the way around, and then I'll go to torque. And that's not something that's in the manual to do, that's just the way I do it. I prefer to go in very slow and deliberate movements when it comes to these things. The worst thing that could happen is that you strip it out and you're dealing with a helicoil. So that's what you don't want. Okay, that's done. So now we'll make preparations to install the valve body. And that prep includes setting up the internal wiring harness and new lockup solenoid for installation. So this is going to be the TCI wiring harness, and at least the portion that gets installed in the transmission. And then we're also running a fits-all lockup solenoid. Now these fits-all solenoids will work with a 204R, 700R4, or 4L60E. However, it should be known that the length of this portion of the solenoid is longer on the 700Rs by about 30% over the 204Rs. And these are all sized for 700R4, 4L60Es. So what Fits-All does is provide a 204R fastener adapter kit so that you can install these and make sure that the height relationship is still consistent with what is to be correct for these transmissions. Alright, so first things first, we want to install the little studs into their locations right here. Fits-All does not give a spec for these, so I run them down to 90 inch-pounds, and that is sufficient. I mean, I've never ever had them come loose. So, and then the nuts, they get the same amount of torque once we install the solenoid. Now, I admit I mocked everything up first before I started filming because just in the interest of time, I didn't want to have me messing around with all the wires and trying to figure out how to actually organize everything, and it's just done so that you kind of see the end product. Okay, 13 millimeters. Okay. Now we're going to install our solenoid and harness. Now you notice there's a little notch cut right here at an angle. Okay, you want that facing inboard toward the transmission. Alright, because this is a relief cut so that when you install your your throttle valve linkage actuator assembly, it doesn't interfere with the body of the solenoid. Okay, use assembly lube on the O-ring. I mean, that's more or less common sense. 13 millimeters on the nut as well. And it doesn't look like it, but you will be able to get a socket on this nut over by the wires without, pinching them or binding them up. Alright, just, let them dangle like that for now. So here's the rest of the kit, along with the package for the solenoid. So that's the solenoid we're using. Okay, you're obviously not going to use those, those studs and nuts for 700R4 4L60E. And then this is the part of the kit that gets installed outside the transmission. So you have your external case connector, a ground, and then your pigtail. And then this is a vacuum switch. And then the other part that it comes with that has to be installed is the two-prong pressure switch. And I installed that into the valve body, which we'll take a look at now. So a few things first. Cover check balls. So here is your manual low check ball, your 1-2 check ball, and your drive 3 check ball. For any applications that are street strip performance oriented, where the stall's in the neighborhood of 2,800 to 3,000 on up, you're blocking off the 1-2 accumulator, and I would also recommend you leave out this check ball here. Now, in this application, we're running a 2,200 stall, so 2,000 to 2,200, that's a little tight for to be leaving out the 1-2 check ball, and I wouldn't recommend you do it simply because the 1-2 shift is going to be overly harsh. But once you're up in there in that 2,800 to 3,000 stall range, that's no longer a concern, and you'll want to get rid of that 1-2 check ball, because what it is kind of a restrictor, if you will, of apply fluid to that 1-2 circuit. Okay, next thing I'll touch on is the mod that we did as part of the CK Performance Kit install. So you notice there's a 1/4-inch cup plug here at the rear location for the feed pipe. So the reason you're doing this is to obtain total control over how long you remain in manual low. In a factory calibration, if you start out in manual low and then you start driving, once you hit a certain vehicle speed, it's going to automatically upshift, even if you don't touch the shifter. So it's called a forced upshift, and that's to basically save the transmission from damage. And that makes perfect sense, but there's reasons why you may want to have a little bit more control over that particular function of the transmission. Now, if you wanted to get rid of that, all you would have to do is just move the manual valve aside or take it out, get in here behind a drift punch in this location right here where my finger is, and just punch out the little cup plug. And that's it. And then the last thing I'll point out is here by the TV plunger and sleeve. So you'll have a roll pin here. This is going to kind of act as an indexing point for the plunger mechanism. And then you're also going to have a little pinhole right here. Okay, this is not any kind of vent or exhaust. It's actually going to serve as a seating location for the little rod stop mechanism that kind of stops the actuator arm from moving any further in its travel. So that's basically just a few tidbits that you'll want to know about the valve body. So now go ahead and grab your manual valve linkage arm. It's this S-shaped arm here, and you're going to want to orient it so that it's kind of facing rearward of the transmission, just like that. And then all you're going to do is mate it with the little hole here on the manual valve, and that's it. Okay, just carefully lower the valve body into position. Line up your bolt holes as best you can. Now here is the TV valve mechanism. So you're going to have your linkage arm that hooks into the cable, and then here is that the plunger stop mechanism. So you have the stop here, that portion of this rod, and then it's this portion of the rod right here by my thumb that's going to seat in that little pinhole. Okay, and then here's where you're going to locate on the roll pin. This little stop mechanism is spring loaded, and it loves, not likes, it loves to pop out on you and have the spring fly across the room. So just be real careful when you're installing it. I'm going to double check. Make sure it's actually in the hole. Looks like it is. Okay, so this is how it's going to work once it's installed. When you set up and adjust this TV cable, you want to set it up with a little bit of preload, just like this. So as soon as you mash on that gas, you're right into the TV boost. Alright, you're opening up that boost circuit and giving yourself immediate line rise, because that's what you want. You don't want any delay in getting line pressure to those applied elements. I want to get this bolt in first. Alright, you're going to have 15 total valve body to case bolts. You're going to have 4 toe bolts. You're going to go right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you're going to have 11 intermediate length bolts. Okay, when you install these bolts, don't run them down just yet, because there's going to be a couple locations we're going to have to install, little wire management clips or guides, and we need the rear filter support in this location. It's going to be like this, so I'll just put that in now. Alright, and then our detent roller. So all these bolts are going to receive between 104 and 108 inch-pounds. Now the book calls for between 9 and 12 foot-pounds. In my humble opinion, 12 foot-pounds is a little strong for all these bolts. You go that far, you kind of run a higher than negligible risk of stripping out one or more of the bolt hole location threads in the case. That's just my opinion. I've installed countless 204R, 700R4, 4L60E valve bodies. The 104 to 108 inch-pound spec has always worked. I've never ever had an issue with any kind of problems using that torque spec. So grab your harness. You're going to route it like this, and it's going to come back through. Like I said, in the interest of time, I've kind of set this up, mocked it up, and put my zip ties where they needed to go. On the sensor or the switch itself, that's 5 to 10 foot-pounds. Okay, you can use a special socket for these, or I believe a 1 1/16 socket also works, or maybe it's 1 1/8, I'm not sure. But I use the good and tight method, so just cinch it down so it's good and tight, aka the German method, and you won't have any issues. Alright, so you're going to route it like this, and then I'll try to incorporate one other factory cable management clip here. So this would go basically kind of like this. It'll skew it out a little bit toward the the wall here, the valve body, or the spine, if you will. Alright, not going to put a whole bunch of cabling in the rear filter support. It's not necessary. Just this one strand right here. That's one length of wire, I should say. It was nice and smooth when I mocked this up But yeah, as soon as I start filming, you know how it goes. All of a sudden, things get complicated. Okay, I got all my bolts in, so I'm gonna go ahead and plug the connector into the case connector. And you could do all this if you want before you install the valve body. I mean, it's up to you how you want to do it. You do it like after, like I am, you know, it gets a little kind of tedious to get the plug-in aligned with the case connector, but you know, it's up to you. 10 millimeter. And there's no specific torque sequence for any of these bolts, but I generally will work in the center in a spiral pattern outward like I do all my valve bodies. Okay, so just double check everything. Make sure you know everything's more or less lined up in the direction and orientation you want it. Okay, what you're looking for is again freedom of movement. If anything that has to move around. Okay, you don't want any wires interfering with anything else. And then make sure these pressure switches, or I should say these connectors, are fully engaged on that pressure switch. Okay, just be slow and deliberate. Don't rush anything, don't jerk the torque wrench. Main reason is you don't want to take a chance on stripping anything out. I mean, that's really the overarching risk here that you want to try to mitigate. Incidentally, this is very sharp. What I probably should have done is taken a sanding disc or something to it and rounded it off, but too late now. So, incidentally, there are 3 different governor valve body spacer plate combinations installed into these 204Rs. And whatever you do, you don't want to mix and match parts. Okay, they're all considered a matched set or a service pack. Okay, service pack is basically just a bunch of components that all work together in a subsystem. So, with the governors, there's a heavyweight governor, a medium weight governor, and a lightweight governor. Overwhelming majority of these transmissions are going to have medium weight governors. Okay, the diesels, and I believe they were produced in either 81, 82, or 82 and 83. And here we're talking about Oldsmobile, the diesel 307s and 350 blocks. They took the heavyweight governor and a valve body that's specifically calibrated for diesel engines. Never install a diesel valve body, governor, spacer plate, etc. onto 204R intended for gas application, because it will shift like shit. Okay, shifts will be way too early, may even stack shift, who knows. But the bottom line is that your calibration for shifting and quality and timing will be way off. So the medium governors, they were installed in pretty much everything other than the diesels and the high performance stuff. So your Monte Carlo Super Sports, Grand Nationals, GNXs, Turbo Trans Am. Turbo Trans Am was 89, 1 year only. And I believe the 442's also got the higher performing, governor and valve body combos. So spacer plate is different with the diesels than it is with all the gas engine stuff. So, you could make it work, but it would require modification. It's not worth getting into, and it's not worth messing around with. Now, an overwhelming majority of these kits are going to have, an overwhelming majority of these transmissions are going to have recalibration kits, shift kits, or whatever installed. So a lot of that is rendered moot, but it's not entirely moot. So lightweight governor and appropriately calibrated valve body, like from a Grand National, for example, that's a great pairing for anything high performance, including into, Grand National. So guys will modify the governors. There is no kits out there that I'm aware of, but they will take the governor, okay, and what they'll do is they will just simply start removing mass from the weights until it shifts at a point in which is, consistent with what they're looking for in their application. And that's really it. That's the only way you can do it. As far as the governor, if you want something that's going to perform like a lightweight governor, you got a medium weight governor, well, you got to, take mass off to get it to go and do what you want. All right, we'll do the governor next. So this is a new seal here, or a new sealing ring. It's a one-piece Teflon ring. Comes in all the paper and rubber kits. Okay, so all you're going to do is you're going to install it, and then just to make sure it's good to go, put the governor into the housing, and just make sure that the housing will hold the governor in place, under its own weight for, a few seconds or whatever. This feels great going in. It's solid. So, you can inspect the housing itself when you take these apart. Clean off the housing, clean off the governor, and then with the pre-existing seal, just do the same thing. If it holds fast, then at least the housing itself is in good shape. If it doesn't, if it falls out and the housing can't hold it, then I would replace the housing. Okay, so this is a different governor gear than what originally came on this thing. The original gear had 13 drive gear teeth for the speedometer. This has 10. So if you're doing a resto mod, then you're going to want to change your gears setup, either drive or driven, based on the vehicle's tire size and final drive ratio. So to use this as an example, the 69 Camaro that this is going into has 373 gears and 27-inch diameter tires in the rear. Okay, for passenger car, it's always going to be the rear. If we installed the original gear that was on here, 13 teeth, his speedo would be way off. So this will get it real close. The driven gear is 27 teeth. So you can go on TCI's website. They have a speedometer calculator, and basically you just provide your inputs, and then it'll spit out a figure for you. So for example, your input values are going to be the rear ratio and your tire size or diameter, and the amount of teeth in either your drive or your driven gear to solve for the other. Okay, you saw what I was doing, just lubing up the governor so I could stick it in the bore there. And then you have your gasket. Okay, this gets the same amount of torque, or the same range of torque for the fasteners as the valve body. I'll go 120 inch-pounds on these, though. They're a little bit bigger. So 13 millimeters on these bolts. Again, no particular order. Alright, last thing we'll do is the speedometer housing for the driven gear. So it's a little bullet. So you're going to install a new seal and then your little retainer. Okay, that's a seal retainer. Don't lose that on this assembly. And then your driven gear is going to go just like this. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention. So you have your engagement slot right here. Okay, that's for your little retainer with your 10mm bolt. So if we're looking at the transmission like this is just going to go like this. It's going to follow the contour of the case for this angled portion of the retainer. So again, common sense, you know. I'm sure you can figure out exactly how to do it, or you know, the orientation. You don't really even need to see it. It's a very simple, straightforward deal. And I believe the torque spec on this is 5 to 10 foot-pounds also, but the German method works just as well on this thing as it does on the nut and on the switch. Just get it good and tight, and that's it. Main thing is you want it square. You want the retainer square to the slot cut into the housing. Alright, so we're now at the point where we would normally put the filter on, the pan gasket, and throw the pan on, but we're actually not going to install either of those things. When you go to install this thing back into the vehicle, you don't want the filter in, and you don't want the pan on, or excuse me, the pan gasket on. All you want is the pan on held with like 4 bolts, maybe 5. Reason being is that as soon as this is in here and you have your TV cable installed and linked into, you know, the little linkage arm here, then what you're going to want to do is take that pan off and validate that you have a little bit of preload on the plunger after you've done your final adjustment. Okay, a final adjustment before initial startup and pressure testing. So if you don't have preload, then when either you or whomever is going to drive this thing goes to accelerate, all right, it's not going to have enough travel on this plunger. Okay, you want this to be preloaded such that as soon as somebody steps on the gas, all right, you're into the TV throttle boost circuit, and you get immediate line rise, assuming everything else is correct. So leave the filter out, put the pan on but no gasket, and then once the initial TV setup and adjustment is all done and you've confirmed you have good preload on that arm on the plunger, then go ahead and install your pan gasket. Well, filter obviously, pan gasket, and then all these bolts get between 98 and 104 inch-pounds. Okay, no different than the 700 R4s, 4L60Es. You know, all very similar. The 4L80Es, I think, even get the same. TH400s, TH350s take a little bit more. They're a little bit, you know, a little bit different. And the 6Ls take a little bit less. So I'll just put, let me put one of these up here, and then we'll be basically done with the underside of the transmission. Now make sure there's a magnet. And I didn't show it, but oh, here, I'll show you real quick. You always want a magnet. I'm not even sure if this pan is going to end up on this transmission, when it finally goes back together. It may not. I'm not sure. I would encourage anyone that's building one of these, if it's in your budget, go ahead and install an aftermarket aluminum pan. Comes with a drain plug, because these things require a little bit more tuning, a little bit more time and attention than do the 700Rs to get dialed in. And so you may find yourself taking out the governor, you may find yourself, doing different things with the valve body, especially in a high performance application. There may be a lot of iterative adjusting and testing and readjusting. So I would not install the factory pan unless that's, unless that's what your budget that's all your budget allows for. Incidentally, if you install that TCC solenoid backwards to where the wires are indexed inboard, you won't be able to get the pan on. Okay, it interferes. All right, I'll talk about the rear transmission mount for a minute. This is basically a brand new one. So you never want to install a used mount, especially if there's any signs of cracking or breakage or whatever the case may be, dry rotting. If these mounts go back on to transmissions, and this is any transmission, and they're worn or cracked or otherwise not serviceable, then they can introduce harmonic vibrations into both the drive line as well as the rear of the transmission, and in extreme cases that could cause severe damage to the gear train as well as potentially the differential gears as well. So always replace your transmission mounts on any overhaul unless they were replaced very recently and you know that to be true. Alright, that more or less wraps up the build. It's been kind of a adventure with respect to parts and, just getting everything dialed in from, a measurement and validation perspective, getting all of our end plays and travels, where they need to be throughout the transmission. Setting up the CK Performance Kit was nice and straightforward, so, no issues there. And as I've been saying throughout this video series and some of my other topical videos on this transmission, if you're going to tackle it, you really need to know a whole lot going in so that you know what you're up against. This particular trans is over and above all the other GM units, at least the ones that I work on, when it comes to complexity, level of effort, attention to detail, nuance, and risk. So you're going to need to take all of that into consideration if you want to get into one of these. And you're going to need a lot of redundancy when it comes to spare parts. Okay, bushings, lip seals, sealing rings, even hard parts. Okay, and as you saw, and as I've discussed in a couple topical videos, as well as the portion of this whole series where I put the drums together, the forward and direct drums on these are almost always bad. Okay, in one aspect or another, they're almost always bad. So you need to plan and ensure that your supply chain is de-risked appropriately up front, because these parts are getting harder and harder to find. Okay, same with the pumps. We had a warped pump body with this transmission. Now, that is not all that common whatsoever. That's just, it's actually the first time I've ever had a pump body in any transmission, any aluminum pump body, that was genuinely warped, that could not be remachined. Just simply couldn't be rehabilitated. So that's the kind of stuff that this thing will throw at you. But that could happen to any transmission. It's just super rare. It just happened to, be on this one. So anyway, just be aware of all that. Once you have a good, routine dialed in, and you develop a rhythm and you get reps on these, like anything else, like tying your shoes, okay, it becomes easier and easier each one you do, and you get more in tuned as far as what you have to do. So anyway, that's the video series. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. We'll catch you on the next one.